it's a blessing to be able to carve out a career as a musician. Believe me, it's like the least you can do if you're honest with yourself is practice. Or I don't even look at it as practicing. I just play the horn. If you have to be told to play, you find something else to do. Be an accountant.
Warning. This episode contains adult language and adult humor.
Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults?
If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is Roger Ingram. Roger has been called one of the hardest swinging lead trumpet players of modern times. Roger has played with some of the past legends of big band like Louis Belson, Woody Herman, and Maynard Ferguson. And Roger's high-octane playing was a huge part of the unique sound of Harry Conick Jr.'s band for 20 years. But Roger is much more than a player. He's also an author, a passionate educator, and of course, the Mute Meister. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. And this episode of the Trumpet Gurus Hang, I am with the one and only Roger Ingram. So, Mr. Roger, it's been such a joy to know you over the years. So, good to have you on the show, my friend.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you refer to me as Mr. Roger. It's kind of like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
Here I am in my neighborhood. My home built by trumpet playing.
And it's a beautiful day too. It is a beautiful. Where's your sweater?
Oh, well, I'll tell you what. See, I'm out here in LaGrange, Illinois. It's a western suburb of Chicago. It's about 17 miles due west of downtown Chicago. And the last couple of days, I actually went out and rode my bike. Right now, it's snowing and in the 20s. It's like the snow is coming down hard. We got about 2 inches on the ground already. So,
it's nuts. I mean, the 2 days ago here was, in the mid 50s, or actually in the 60s. And then now it's like, in the low 40s.
Yeah. Well, also Chicago, we're on the lake there, and Lake Michigan, it brings an interesting weather colors. It's like it just you never know what's going to happen. I mean, I love it because I grew up in Southern California, and it was like I remember like a bunch of 80-degree Christmases and stuff, which is just kind of weird, because the night before, on Christmas Eve, you're all watching, the Bing Crosby movies and everything. You see the snow, and then we get up the next morning, it's 80 degrees.
Yeah.
So, and after going on the road, when I started doing a lot of traveling, and I started like the mid 70s, I started already going on the road. I kind of gravitated to people from the East Coast and the Midwest, and so eventually I moved to New York, and I was there for 17 years, and now I've been here for 11 years. Vicki and I been married going on 11 years.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like the weather, and it gives you an excuse to buy a lot of nice clothing.
Exactly.
Because out in LA, everybody wears like flip-flops and Hawaiian shirts and shorts, and you can actually get by all year on that, except for, maybe it get down to 45 in February, But I mean, it's like, I kind of like being in an environment where style is addressed a little bit more readily just because of the fact that we're forced to have to wear more garments, especially during the fall and the winter.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like my clothes. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I like having a nice seasonal wardrobe to work with.
Nice background, by the way.
Thank you. This is my computer right now where I do a lot of stuff. Sometimes I'll set up the lights and everything over in the practice area. But I got a lot of horns out right now. I'm in the middle of doing a mass cleaning on all my horns. Because of COVID, it's really good to be a little more hygienic, as far as
keeping your horns clean. So they're all piled over there right now. So I apologize for the rather dank background that we have here right now.
Okay, just as long as I don't see like any apparitions or things like that going on in the background.
No,
yeah,
okay. The only thing we have back here that most people don't see nowadays is books.
What's that?
Yeah, right. There's a lot of book reading going on in our household.
Well, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Well, let me ask you this, Roger. Actually, we'll talk about this a little bit. Recently, I had on the show Josh Rzepka.
Oh, yeah.
Friend of yours. And Josh was talking to me about your work ethic and saying that, for someone who is as accomplished as you are, you still have this desire to push your limits, to take yourself into some uncomfortable places. I mean, you built quite a career for yourself as a lead trumpet player, but, he said that you're just like really diving headlong into the legit stuff and doing a lot more of that these days. So, I mean, can you kind of talk through that process and, what is it that drives you to go beyond where you are right now and look at new ways of expressing yourself?
Well, you look at other professions like being a general contractor or being a landscaper. It's like sitting down and practicing my trumpet during the day is a lot easier than roofing houses in like July or August. You know what I mean? It's not such an onerous task to sit down and, I tell my students, oh, poor baby, you got to sit down and actually play the trumpet. The thing is I love music and I love trumpets and I love trumpet players. And I'm sure there's some people out there perhaps listening to this. There's a ton of trumpet players that I admire and I respect and I try to learn from just from listening. But, it's not such a hard thing. It's like my whole life is built around the fact that I was able to carve out a career as a musician, which I'm very pleased about that. So, and I have to sit in the summertime, I have to sit in an air-conditioned home and practice my trumpet. In the wintertime, I have to sit in a nice home that's heated and practice my trumpet. It's not such an onerous task. It's not really a hard thing to do. If you want, I can give you kind of a rundown of what I do during the day. You see the ceiling tiles.
Right.
I do a lot of recording here now, especially the last year. I have a recording studio set up here in my house. And I sit in the recording studio is actually, we have mics and baffles around my practice area. So when somebody sends a file and I need to put on a trumpet part, I just sit down at my practice area where I've been sitting. We've been here for like 11 years. And I just pull it out and I push record because I got the Royer mic and the Coles mic just all sitting there. And then I play what I have to play. But I also practice there too when there's not any kind of a session or something that I have to do. And I get up pretty much when the sun comes up, and I'll do my whole thing where I'll warm up the warm up that Bobby Shoe showed me when I was a kid, which means you start with just warming up your body first, like stretching like that, and get the intercostal muscles between the ribs like kind of warmed up by moving like this. You can actually see old films of Maynard. He used to do that too. And the lower abdominals. And I start taking some deep breaths, because basically as brass players, we're all human air compressors. You pull in, you inhale air and you blow it out with a little bit of force. It's just like what an air compressor does. So you have to get the mechanism and the apparatus kind of warmed up before you even bring the trumpet or the trumpet mouthpiece into it, if you want to survive and not hurt yourself, and it's like, so I get all that going and doing the flapping and the free buzzing, and I buzz things and I get it going. And then I bring the mouthpiece in, and I let it sit there. And you got to realize, and this is still all in answer to your question. You got to realize that, the only natural instrument is the human voice. I mean, all these instruments we played are all man-made things. Our lips weren't designed to have a circular piece of brass pressed up against it for hours at a time, but we love doing this, and we came up with these instruments. And so the whole idea of warming up is to help you to survive the process without hurting yourself to the point to where you can't do it anymore. And so you want to get your body going. You want to get the blood flowing. You want to get the mouthpiece going, and just step by step, buzz the mouthpiece a little bit, and then you bring the horn into the process. You blow some air through it, get it warmed up, and then just play some long tones. And so I go through that whole process maybe 6 or 6:30 a.m. My whole family sleeps through it, which is great. Vicky's got some incense burning right now. That's where those little smoke things are going. And so the whole family, they don't care, because if it wasn't for trumpet playing, we wouldn't have this place. And,
gotcha.
And then I do about a half an hour, and I start thinking about trying to get the sound right. The first thing I think about is it's like you have to find your technique anew every day. A piano player goes up to a piano and they just go beep, and there's your sound. A brass player, we have to create our sound. We have to find it every day, and you can't force it. You have to let it come. And so, mid-register, just I'll get moving around. I'll play, some little bit of maybe an etude, or I'll improvise a blues or something just in the mid-register, just to try to get it flowing. And then I'll open up the Schlossberg and I'll try to imitate or mock up the scenario that I'm playing, like principal trumpet with like the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra or something like that. I mean, I'll try to approach playing as an orchestral player, because it makes you think about your attack and your sound, even though I'm mainly interested in being like a big band lead trumpet player or a session player. It doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of player you want to be. You should try to have an orchestral standard to your technique. Try to keep everything clean and in tune. And I'll put the tuner up there and I'll play 4 or 5 pages from the Schlossberg book in front of the tuner and try to make sure everything's locking in. That's what I'll do for the first half hour. And then, I'll let the cat upstairs so she can look out the windows, and I'll get my breakfast, and I'll get some coffee for Vicky. I'll wake Vicky up, and then I'll go sit back down. I leave the horns out, and I'll just sit back down, and I'll do another half an hour. I'll do Clark. I run my basic fundamentals every day. I'll run stuff out of Clark, Arbin, and Schlossberg, and the top tones for the trumpeter, just to keep my technique at an acceptable level, because I get called to do recordings and shows. Right. So you have to keep your technique clean. That doesn't mean I'm just handcuffed to just doing exercise books. I mean, after I've done 4 or 5 half-an-hour sessions working on stuff like that, as the day starts going through the day, early evening, I'll put on Aebersols. And I'll look at the changes, and I'll try to negotiate myself through a bunch of tunes, because a lot of gigs I got are called, in Chicago, they call them jobbing dates, and on the East Coast, they call them club dates. On the West Coast, they call them casuals, Yeah. But I have to improvise a lot. And now that I've gotten off the road, I got off the road 11 years ago, where I was for 35 years, I was just playing lead trumpet on big bands and stuff, sitting next to some of the greatest jazz trumpet players in the world, like Greg Gisbert and Leroy Jones and Dan Miller, Yeah. Now, and I absorbed a lot from hearing those guys every night. And I saw the little vehicles they would use, and sometimes they would repeat certain things in their solos. So from all that and what Bobby Shue showed me about how to learn a tune and working through chord changes, towards the end of my practice day here, I improvise. And I also work on C trumpet and piccolo trumpet. And that was very nice of Josh Rzepka to mention that and say that, but it's true. And it's like, how do I feel about doing that? Like I said, it's better than roofing houses in the middle of August. You know what I'm saying? Like working retail at a Starbucks or something. And I'm not saying those jobs are bad. I'm saying I'm very fortunate to be able to have carved out a life just playing the trumpet and being involved with music. So I show it some respect by actually sitting down and keeping my chops and my technique at a high standard.
Yeah.
No, it's like the least I can do for what I've been blessed with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, I get you 100%. And I think it's one of those things that, you don't learn in school. You learn it through the life experience. And I've had this conversation with a lot of younger musicians. I've been, I wasn't this year because of COVID, obviously, but I've been involved with some amusement park work and going in and rehearsing bands and things like that. And I would often hear from the kids, oh my God, this is such a grueling schedule. And, I don't know how I'm going to make. I'm like, look, dude, you've got 4 shows, you got 4 20-minute shows to do a day.
That's not so bad.
Yeah. You're getting paid to do what you love. And,
and you have to play with, you get a new trumpet and a new case and you get to hold it and play. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I tell my students, I say, if you're interested in doing something, regardless of what you're up against, you'll find a way to do it. If you're not interested in doing something, you'll find an excuse. And exactly. if you find yourself coming up with excuses to your teachers and to your band leaders who ask you why you kind of suck today or whatever, maybe you should find something else to do. I mean, because it's a blessing to be able to carve out a career as a musician. Believe me, it's like the least you can do if you're honest with yourself is practice. Or I don't even look at it as practicing. I just play the horn. If you have to be told to play, you find something else to do. Be an accountant.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, you're one of those people. Not everybody who can teach. And, you definitely have the acumen, you have the experience as a world-class player, but you also have developed into and have the reputation of being a world-class educator. So was the education part something that was big to you even in the beginning phases of your career, or was this something you kind of grew into?
Well, I try to be a good teacher. I try to be a good educator, and I size up my students and I tailor make my lesson plan for them per individual. And I never ever thought I was going to be a teacher when I started playing when I was 8, and my family was very poor, so we couldn't afford lessons. So I self-taught until I got into high school. And then I started mowing lawns and taking lessons from Maroon Holt and Bobby Shue and stuff like that, because, I grew up in LA and I was surrounded by like some of the greatest players in the world. It's like, it's like you go into Hollywood, you see John Audino and Chuck Finley and Buddy Childers running around, and they were all really friendly guys. And they knew I was this young kid interested in playing the trumpet, and they were all really beautiful cats, man. Bobby was a beautiful cat. Everybody was so beautiful. And so all I wanted to do was just play. And, and I saw people and this is like the early 70s. I saw them buying homes and putting their kids through college from just sitting in the recording studio playing trumpet. I said, what a beautiful existence, man.
Sign me up for that.
And, you know, it's like, and what I realize about these guys is they were all just trying to be professional. They were trying to be good. They were trying to show up on time and do a good job. And they let everybody else decide who was the best trumpet player in the world, the best this and that, the best and that. All anybody really wanted to do was just work.
Yeah.
You know, it's like let all the critics voice their opinions about who's the best. We don't care. All we want to do is just continue working. So that's what I wanted to do. And then when I was like 10th grade, 11th grade, my high school band was really an exceptional high school band because of my band director, John Ronaldo, who was also a great trumpet player. And we got a big reputation in the LA area as being this hot high school band. And I was the lead player in it. And the junior high trumpet players started asking me if they could take a trumpet lesson with me. And we were living in Eagle Rock. And so I started, and I wasn't even charging them any money. I said, well, why don't you just come over to the house? And I don't know, what do you need? I mean, so right there, I started realizing that the teacher's job is to serve. I soon realized that, you know, I'm there to try to help, to try to serve. And so I started having little students, you know, I mean, that not little students, but little, you know, I became a junior teacher. You know, I started to learn 15 or 20 minutes. They come to my house and I started experiencing teaching. So all during this time, I'm studying with Bobby Shue and LaRune Holt. Now, LaRune Holt was a great technician on the trumpet. He was the second trumpet player on the Lawrence Welk show for years. And I was studying with him during this time. He's the one who put me through the Ivan book and the Clark book and the Schlossberg book. Bobby Shue was a completely different thing for me. He's taught me about the mechanics of how the embouchure and the aperture work. He showed me the yoga breath. He explained backboards and cup sizes and mouthpieces. And I sat next to him in Louis Belson's band, and I got a lot of great experience from him about how to approach being a big band lead trumpet player, you know. So all during this time I'm studying with those guys, one time I came over to Bobby Shue's house for a lesson. And he said, you know, hey, Roger, I hear you've been giving some trumpet lessons. And I said, yeah, you know, like some of the younger kids at school wanted to come over. So he goes, good. Today I want you to give me a trumpet lesson. And I was like, what? He goes, no, okay. I want you to give me a trumpet lesson. I want you to treat this time that we have together today as a trumpet lesson for me. And I said, okay. And I sat down and I started giving Bobby a trumpet lesson, and he would stop me every 5 or 10 minutes and say, that's not how you do that. The best way to approach this particular aspect of the lesson is to do it this way and do it this way. He taught me how to teach at that lesson. And he did that to me, and he would be unexpected about it too, because he didn't want me to come over prepared for that.
Right.
He sprung it on me.
Yeah.
And he did that to me 2 or 3 different times. And he taught me how to be a teacher. Now, just recently, there was a student that had been studying with me, and he had a problem with his braces. He had the braces taken off, and he had problems playing with it because the body hadn't adjusted to the muscle memory yet for the surface.
Right.
And he went and took some lessons with Bobby online. And then Bobby got back to him. He goes, how come you haven't done this? And how come you haven't done that? It's like he kind of bitched me out. He's still doing it to me, you know? And so I had to rethink. I said, well, yeah, really. But, and I was saying, well, you know, it's challenging when you're dealing with a cat in junior high school, when you're teaching them online and there's no band for them to play in. They can't incorporate what I've been showing them in a platform where there's music to even see if what I'm showing them works. It's been very challenging the last year because these kids don't have a band to play in.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So anyway, as far as my teaching is concerned, I'm always trying to improve, you know, as a teacher. And I feel that I have never told anybody anything that's going to cause them any harm. And I'm not real dogmatic about my approach. To further answer this question, a lot of my ability to teach came from this. When I graduated high school, I did a short tour with the Quincy Jones Big Band.
Okay.
It was called the Quincy Jones Big Band, featuring the Watts Line singers and dancers and introducing the Brothers Johnson. And Quincy had just finished producing their album, and he wanted a big band full of young people. Ted Nash was in that band. My roommate was Tom Kubis. And you know, Shahib Shahab was playing baritone sax because Quincy wanted somebody out there who was an old friend of his, so he asked somebody to hang with while he was out there because we were all a bunch of kids, you know.
Right.
And so I did that, and then afterwards I toured for a year playing lead trumpet for Connie Stevens, and then Tom Jones's management called my house and offered me the job playing lead trumpet for Tom Jones. So I took that gig, and I was with him for about 6 years. Now, Bobby Shue, who had also done the Tom Jones gig maybe 10 years before me, and I was 18, and this was the 70s, and AIDS hadn't come around yet. And I was already smoking cigarettes and drinking beer because on all these bands I was on, I was always the baby. And I was trying to, you know, try to keep up with the older people. So I got into some bad habits early, and nothing that was detrimental to me being able to handle the job or be a professional. But I was turning into kind of a wild kid already. So Bobby said to me, when I went out, he said, "Now look, don't make a career out of touring with Tom Jones. You know, I don't want you to get lost out there." And he goes, "Now I know what you're going to do. You're going to go out there and have a good time and party and make a lot of new friends." He said, "But I want you to stay focused." He said, "So what I want you to do is," I mean, he was talking to me like he was my dad, you know, and he was saying, "I want you to take a trumpet lesson from everybody, from any or everybody in any of these major cities that you can while you're out there touring." So when I was with Tom Jones in those days, we'd do a week at a time at the Mill Run Theater in Chicago, a whole week, the Westbury Music Fair, a whole week. We would play venues all up and down the East Coast, and we'd be there for a week. So after your first day, you get in there and you do the sound check rehearsal and you do the first show. From then on out for the rest of the week, my days are free. So when I was in New York, for instance, I took one lesson from William Vacchiano. I took a series of lessons. I took one lesson with Roy Stevens. I took a series of lessons with Carmine Caruso. I took a series of lessons with Jerry Cowlett. When I was in Philly, I took a lesson from Dr. Donald Reinhardt. When I was in Chicago, I took a lesson from Reynold Schilke. And so I started taking lessons with everybody, and I started keeping focused, like the way Bobby Shue said I should do, you know. And the only thing that I'm very dogmatic about is to not be dogmatic in my approach to students. And by trying to tell them there's only one way to play trumpet. And if you don't do it my way, there's a lot of people who put out books and they make the mistake of saying this is the only way to play. What it is, it's the only way to play for them because it works so well for them. They write it up and they think that it should be universally applied. It's not so, you know. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, and granted, I know these people really believe in some of these things that they come up with because it worked for them. And I think that's fantastic. But don't try to convince people that it's the only way to play, that it can be universally applied, and that's it, because when I finally got to Chicago and I took a lesson with Reynolds Schilke said, okay, well, who have you been studying with? And I mentioned Laroon Holt, who he knew of because Laroon was a busy session guy in LA, at least with the Lawrence Work Show. And I listed all the books he's doing. And Laroon had me learn the Haydn Trumpet Concerto. And he helped me and my schoolmates with Bugler's Holiday for our spring concert. And, more legit kind of stuff. Got my legit chops together with him. And then I mentioned Bobby Shew. And he goes, oh, Bobby Shew, he's a great jazz player and a lead trumpet player. I said, yeah. And he goes, well, who else have you studied with? And I said, well, I took a lesson with William Vacchiano. He goes, oh, how's Bill doing? And I said, great, and I listed everybody off. He goes, all right. So what are all these teachers telling you? And, Schilke was kind of a gruff guy. He wonderful trumpet player and horn designer, as we all know. He played principal with Chicago Symphony for years, And I said, well, they're all kind of telling me the same thing, but in their own way, And he goes, well, what's one of the things they tell you? And I say, well, they say, fill up the horn with air. And what I learned from him was from his next statement to me. He goes, fill up the horn with air. And he had horns hanging on the wall of his little studio there. And he would he gave me the lesson upstairs at the Wabash factory,
Yeah.
He goes, see that horn up there on the wall? It's already full of air. Your job is to move the air. And man, did that just make a light bulb go off of my head. And I was with Tom Jones, and we had a week at the Mill Run Theater, which is not there anymore. It was a theater in the round. The stage went around, Don't fill up the horn. He said, fill up the horn with air. Well, what? So until it pops? He goes, you don't fill the horn with air. You move the air. Your job is to move the air. And I went to work that night, and something just clicked. It's still with me today. That one piece of information, after all these lessons I took with these great teachers and trumpet players, the one thing that Reynolds Schilke told me maybe affected me more than any other teacher, except for maybe the things that Bobby Shew told me, and it made me remember what Bud Brisbois told me when I had the opportunity to take a couple lessons with him in LA 2 or 3 years earlier, when I was about 16. Bud Brisbois said it's air speed. He goes, when you want to ascend in the upper register, it's not about creating more air. It's taking the same amount of air you've been using in the mid and mid upper register and get it going fast. He said, that's why we do this thing called the yoga breath, because the yoga breath, if you do it properly, increases PSI. And remember what I said to you? We're all human air compressors. It's like the yoga breath helps you compress the air so it gets moving fast. It's faster air up there, not more air. I mean, the surest way to fail developing your upper register is to try to see how much air you can blow in there. It's speed up the air you already got. The yoga breath was not designed to enable you to take the world's biggest breath. You can take the yoga breath with small amounts of air, medium amounts of air, large amounts of air. Bud Brisbois said to me, the amount of air you bring in is only determined by how long you need to sustain a particular note or phrase. What register you're playing in does not determine the amount of air you bring in. What register you're playing in determines on how fast or slow you get that air moving. Mm-hmm. So as far as me teaching, I had a lot of experiences taken from a lot of different teachers, and some of them had real dogmatic attitudes too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Bobby warned me about that before I started going on the road doing this. He said, a lot of people are going to say this is the only way you should play, and there's only one way to play, and just take it with a grain of salt or tongue in cheek, all right, and just let it go. And he said, because when it comes to gathering information, it's all good. Mm-hmm. Even if someone gives you a bunch of terrible information, you can remember that and say, that's the most terrible information I've ever got in my life. And you keep it in your file,
Exactly.
So as far as me being a trumpet teacher, all I can reflect upon is the fact that I, took at least one lesson with a lot of different great players. In LA, I took a lesson with Manny Klein. I took a series of lessons with James Stamp. Some of these great players that I've had a chance to sit next to, whether they knew it or not, they were giving me a trumpet lesson. I lived in New York for 17 years, and I used to sub for Daryl Shaw on the Broadway show Chicago. And even though I was in and out of town a lot, I was actually based out of New York. I never really got to stay in there because I was just so handcuffed to going out on the road. I got known as a guy, Roger, go on the road. Yeah. But when I would be in, Daryl Shaw started keeping track of what my schedule is, and he'd have me sub on Chicago, and I got to sit next to John Frosk. And I became like one of Daryl's first call subs to do that because Frosk liked playing with me. And I got to do that for about 7 years. And we're talking John Frosk. We're talking about a guy who used to be the first trumpet player on The Tonight Show when it was in New York, one of the greatest session players ever. And I got along with him, and then I finally, I moved to Chicago, and then he left the show. So I kind of lost track of John Frost right now. I don't know what he's doing. I think he's just hanging out on his boat. But that was a trumpet lesson for me. Every single show, even though it was the same show, I would learn some different stuff, And so as far as absorbing information, if you're open-minded, I tell my students, that's one of the greatest lessons you can have, and you get it for free. In fact, I got paid for having those lessons with John Frosk. And if you love it, and if you want to do it, it's just like, it goes to what one thing Bobby Shue told me when I was a kid. He said, Roger, it's not necessarily the exercise you're playing. It's how you think about it when you're playing it. And when I used to go and sit and do Chicago and sit next to Frosk, it wasn't necessarily the show we were playing. It's how I would think of his interpretation of it that I learned from. Yeah. In fact, Frosk wanted me to learn his book. He wanted, because I was going in and on the second book. He said, I want you to learn the first book so I can call you to sub. And I didn't want to sub on the first book, because then I wouldn't get to sit next to Frosk. So I just was like, oh, okay. And then I go on the road with Harry for a month or two, and I come back, and he goes, and I'd be back in on the second book. And Frosk said, so did you learn the first book? And I said, I didn't have time to learn. I will. And he was like, well, okay, because, it's like, I like to call you in to sub for me. And I never did, because it wouldn't be as much fun. Because, I was subbing on a lot of shows. It's not like I didn't need to do it that bad to where I'd go in and play the first book and have to, and I'm not saying that whoever I'd be sitting next to on the second book, I wouldn't learn from them too. But it was so much fun because he was such an old school cat, man. I mean, real old school attitude. I mean, a lot of people said, you're going to sub on Chicago and sit next to Frost. If you're not playing a Bach, he's going to not like you, And I was playing a Schilke in those days. And about 5 years into me showing up with a Schilke, he finally looked at me in between tunes. He said, what kind of horn is that? And I said, it's a Schilke. He goes, it sounds good. That was it. After all this time, people saying, he's not going to like you if you play. He didn't care. He really didn't care. Now, of course, I was instrumental in designing the horn by Exo Brass, the 1600i, that is manufactured by the Jupiter Band Instrument Company. XO is their professional line. John Fedchuk was instrumental in designing a great jazz lead trombone that they make too. So I mean, the thing is that Frost didn't care, and so sometimes people get the wrong impression about it. He was an old school cat, but he was friendly. It's like and his flugelhorn. I don't think he liked flugelhorn so much because he had polka dots. He had polka dots all over his flugelhorn. So I that was a long way around to answer your question, but it's like as far as me teaching, I have to reflect on how I learned.
Right.
So and I try to, when someone wants to take a lesson from me, and one thing Bobby Shue again, he told me, he said, you are your own best teacher. And what that means, the way I interpreted that, was when you pay someone for their time and their information, you're paying them for their time and information. They're giving you information. They're giving you their opinion on how things work and how you should approach playing, and they kind of become your coach. It's up to you to go home and apply it.
Yep.
You are teaching yourself. I mean, if every student would just think about that, say, you're teaching yourself, you're gathering information. If you can't sit next to John Frost, then pay somebody or pay John Frost to take a trumpet lesson if you don't have the opportunity. I mean, if there's a particular thing you want to learn, you got to choose the right teacher to try to show you how to do that. I mean, I've had students come to me and they want to learn how to improvise. And I say, well, I can show you to a degree, but I would suggest, I used to send everybody over to Mark Colby, who passed away last year. But the trumpet players, I used to send them over to a jazz tenor sax player, because then you're not going to get hung up on all the geek stuff with mouthpieces and trumpets. You're going to be really dealing with music. I've had some people come to me, they want to improve their double tonguing or triple tonguing. I send them over to an orchestral player, because I'm working on those things too. My ability to double tongue and triple tongue is a good standard. It's acceptable to play any show or anything. But I'm not sitting around playing Scheherazade and stuff either, too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I think the students, they need to really investigate and do some research on each one of these people they decide that they want to study with. Because I'll be honest with them. If I say, well, I may not be the right cat for that, and it would help. I'm helping them by saying, go see this person. Now, there's some things that I can really help people with, and I tap into, well, how did I learn that? And sometimes you can teach by example,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I know there's kind of like I look at teaching from almost like two different perspectives, right? So there's one, like you were saying about learn everything you can from everyone you can. So that's the experiential thing. It's like everyone has a lesson that they can teach you, and whether it's the lesson of what to do or the lesson of what not to do.
I've had a lot of people be great examples of what not to do. After 35 years on the road, I've seen a lot of stuff. It's like, you definitely don't want to do that.
Just don't do that. So it's like keeping your eyes and your ears and your head open. So you got that side, but then you have the mentoring side, and that's a little bit different than just like taking a lesson. That's when you want to have somebody who's really going to guide you through things, and that's where I think that the personality really comes into play, because to have that really good student-teacher relationship, that mentor-mentee relationship, you have to be able to connect on a level deeper than just the information. There has to be some level where you can, whether you're able to vibe together a little bit more. So it's that difference between, okay, I'm just going to get the basics over here, but when you really want to dive deep, I think that's when you have to have a very special relationship like you've obviously had with Bobby over the years. You just got to find that person that's able to speak to you in a language that you understand.
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to be civil. And you have to have good basic social skills. You have to have some sort of decorum where there's some manners.
Are there trumpet players that fit that category?
Yeah. Some.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, you have to have good communication skills. I mean, you have to create an environment that's going to be conducive for the student's education. You can't have a bunch of distractions going on in your pad. And I have things to inspire them. And I still, because of the pandemic and everything, I've restored mutes. I have my own collection of restored mutes. I have those just laying around. They can try them all. And I have like different mouthpieces. I got horns laying out, and so I create an environment that's conducive to them learning and to put their interest. And there's records, and we can listen to records, and they can come hang with me in my musical environment. So you got to create that. But even still, when it comes down to stressing a certain point or concentrating on a particular application, there has to be a good one-on-one communication, and you have to be able to tell if your student is distracted, or if maybe they're hungry, or if they're obsessed with something that they have to do in the future, or something that happened to them the day before. And a lot of times when a student is getting ready to prepare for an audition, they're thinking so much ahead about what they have to do that they forget to be in the here and now.
Exactly. So
that you can actually work on it and don't think about it so much. And let's just, calm down. And I have them look around and play with the different horns. Now let's talk about you playing through this thing, and let's slow the speed down, and just and get them to repeat it more and more and more. And let's bring the tempo up a little bit to where it's where they want it, But you have to create an environment I'm serious about this. It's like I want them to come out of there just blazing trails. I want them to be the best trumpet players that they can possibly be, and I want them to be happy.
Yeah. Well, that's a very important point too. Is that you see this especially like more in the classical world, I think, but in also other arts like dance and stuff like that. That there's so much pressure put on the student for this high level of skill that they just absolutely suck the joy out of the process.
Well, it's because it's such a competitive field, and there's so much obsession now with like who's the best lead player, who's the best high note player, who's the best clarinet. Who cares? The actual players, all we want to do is get the job done. Like I said that in the beginning of this interview. It's like, how about just being a professional, showing up and doing a good job? Let everybody else decide who's the best, because the students get obsessed with that idea. If I can't be the absolute best at this, then they get hysterical over it. I say, why don't you just do a good job and play this thing nice and let everybody else decide if it's the greatest thing that's ever happened in the world of music? It's like, take some of the burden off of yourself by, trying to hold yourself up to such a high standard. If it doesn't sound as good as Maurice Andre, it's like, I suck. It's like, man, I'm sure Maurice Andre didn't think that when he was coming up. Because he loved, you could tell by the way he played the films I see him, he just loved it so much. He didn't care. He just wanted to play. He just wanted it to be beautiful. He was trying to create beauty for the listener, So when these students, they go in to do these auditions, instead of trying to be like absolutely perfect and the best player that ever lived, how about creating some beauty for your auditioner? How about doing a performance of them, and whether they like you or not, when I leave this room, I'm going to at least play something pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about that. I mean, this is music and this is an art. So
yeah, it's not a big competition 24. I mean, it's a competitive field, but don't let that take over from the beauty. It's like, man, why don't you just don't forget about the music? It's like everybody's so obsessed with who's the greatest in the world, who's the greatest saxophone player in the world, the greatest bass player. How about the second greatest or the third greatest or the fourth greatest? There's some bad mofos.
Yeah.
It's like, man, and I determine success sometimes on how much is he working.
Yeah.
I mean, how busy is this cat? How busy is this woman? How busy is this girl? You look at somebody like Alison Balsam. She's constantly doing guest soloist appearances with major symphonies all over the world and doing instructional videos and everything. She's probably pretty good. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's like, especially about auditions, why don't you just go and play some music for whoever is going to be an auditioner and show them some beauty and some love and some human emotion and some soul, you know?
Well, I mean, it's like if we took a sports analogy on that, it's like because it's kind of a cultural thing, I think, a societal thing, where you see so many players who are obsessed with being the best player in the league or the best player on their team, and as opposed to, for me personally speaking, I would rather be, the 10th worst player on a basketball team that was a dynasty than to be the best player on a team that never won a championship. It's about making the team better, about being that, whatever I did helped us to achieve a level of greatness more so than the individual greatness.
Well, yeah, like to that point, when one of the things I do with my local students here in Chicago is I bring them on local gigs with me. And I clear it with the band leader. And there's this one student I have, Grace Mulvey, and she's got so much talent. She's going to be great. I bring her and sit her in the trumpet section. There's some next to me, next to Dave Katz or something. I bring her Pete Ullman's band, and I give her practical experience of just playing the section. And I say, all you got to be is be cool, be quiet, and just sit there and do the gig. And I give them some practical experience. And what I try to show them is just do what you can do for that band leader to make his band sound good. When you show up to gigs, it's kind of like, how can I serve you and your band? What can I do to make your band sound good? And when I bring these students on the bands with me, I say, that's the intent. What can I do to make you a more popular band leader so people will want to hire your band? And then that's going to turn around and make you sound good. And then you're going to be on a band that's busy. So that means financially, that's good for everybody. Don't go in there on a gig and say, I'm going to be the star of the band and I'm going to stick out and I'm going to like hang over on high notes and stuff. It's like, no, your job is to make that band sound better than it was,
Yeah.
To serve. It's the same thing as about teaching. You want to go in there and you want to serve, And believe me, when I was a young man and I was first starting out and I started discovering my upper register, I made all the mistakes in the world. I mean, I used to draw attention upon myself and it's taken all this time for me to grow up and find out what my job really is, And when I was working on the Harry Conick's band, I mean, I had a carte blanche. I had a green light he used to write stuff so high and he wanted me to hang that stuff over past the cutoff. One time we were on a record date and I had a high A written at the end and we were between second trumpet players that we would use on the road. So I said, well, you got to get Tony Cadillac. And Tony Cadillac, it was Songs I Heard or something album. And Tony Cadillac sitting next to me playing second. And Tony is such a great guy to have in a section because he listens. and he would follow me like white on rice, you know. And he's a great soloist and lead trumpet player in his own right. And he's such a humble cat. He said, "Oh, okay, I'm going to go play second," and he made everything sound great. But Harry wrote this high A, and I cut it right off. And in those days, Harry was not into overdubbing. It's like if it's a take he didn't like, he'd make it play all the way from the beginning to the end again. And it was a beautiful take, and we cut it right off. And he said, "Roger," he said, "man, I want you to hang that note over at the end, and I want you to kiss it off." And Tony started laughing, and he was going, "Oh man," because every time a recording would come out and I was doing that, I would get crap from Bobby Shue saying, "Man, why are you hanging over like that? Everybody knows who's playing a lead. You don't have to do it." And I say, "Bobby, really? Harry wants me to do that." And he didn't believe me, you know. He thought I was just being, you know, like on some kind of a ego chip or something. And I had a discussion about that with Tony. So Tony started laughing because he knew what was going on in my head. So we had to do to take over again. And I started calculating in my head, how much can I hang over to make Harry happy, but get the least amount of crap from Bobby Shue when this record comes out? And it was during that period of time that I started growing up a little bit. And now, I mean, because outside of the world of Harry Conick Jr. and his big band, in the world of music, you know, in the entire world of music, in the world of the music business, it's frowned upon to hang a note over past the conductor's cutoff. You know, it's like you generally don't want to be doing that. And so, I mean, I do a lot of shows now and I do a lot of recording, and man, I'm right off on everything. I mean, more than almost to a fault now. I cut off sometimes before some of the other players do, because it got to be such a thing. Now on Harry's band, that was a different thing. And it was kind of an exciting effect. You know, Harry really liked it. And he kind of wanted it, you know. And for that band, okay, it's kind of exciting. But I had to watch myself because I had carte blanche. I had a green light on doing that stuff. And I finally, towards the end there, I started not really wanting to do it. And after 20 years, that was one of the things that led to me. And the size of the band had gotten cut down. It wasn't the big band anymore. And it was kind of like, you know, and I met my wife and I wanted to get off the road after 35 years. So a lot of things contributed to me 11 years ago, finally coming off and settling here in one town and actually becoming part of the local musical community for the first time in my life, even though I based myself out of a lot of the different towns, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, so as far as the interpretation and playing and doing what the leader wanted, that's what the leader wanted. That's what he wanted. When I go and I bring my students on bands around here, I say, you kind of figure out what this band is about and see what you can do to make it sound good, and you'll work. Because they will appreciate the fact that you have their best interests in heart. They're the ones paying you. Yeah. You know, it's like you're not doing them a big favor because there's a whole bunch of trumpet players that can play.
Yeah. Well, that's some very sage advice there from you.
Coming from me.
Yeah. So, but you know what? That actually, it's a great story because, a lot of people do listen to some of that stuff. And I know that I certainly have listened to tons of the recordings you did with Harry, and you know there was that almost, I wouldn't say almost like a rawness to the sound.
Yeah.
Which I mean I think I can see because it's consistent throughout the recordings that he's done.
It was
intentional. It's that's that New Orleans kind of,
they wanted that, man.
Yeah, wanted a little raucous, wanted a little bit of rough around the edges, but man, it certainly worked. And like you were saying earlier, you had such great players in that section. Tony, Dan, Leroy. Who
Tony was just on a couple of recordings, and
mm-hmm.
Tony didn't want to travel with the band, but when we needed somebody, like when we were doing a TV show
mm-hmm.
or a big special at Radio City Music Hall, and we were in between one of the section players, because not everybody wanted to stay on the road for it, Tony would come. And I'm telling you, man, he is a joy to work with in a trumpet section. I mean, he's just such a complete musician. But to get back to what you're saying, I've become very conservative with my playing, in the last few years. And there's one more point I want to make about all that. During the 20 years that I traveled with Harry, I mean, when you're on the road every day, and you're moving, we moved around every day. We'd drive all night after the gig. The show is a 2-hour show. And of those 2 hours, you're really only playing about an hour or an hour 15 minutes worth of music. And most hotel security officials frown upon there being a lot of trumpet playing going on in the room. So basically, I was only playing like maybe an hour and a half a day, as opposed to now I practice in 30 increments all through the day, whether I work or not. I play no less than 4 or 5 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so the equipment that I was using on Harry's band, because he wrote everything way up there. It was not your typical lead trumpet book. It was an unusual book that was written about a third higher than most lead trumpet books were. And if you're only playing an hour and 15 minutes a day, I needed to rely on smaller equipment to survive it. Remember, back to surviving it, because we didn't come out of the womb with little trumpets. We're not supposed to be doing this, So I wanted to survive the gig so I could continue doing the gig. I didn't want to hurt myself. Any one night, I could not afford to hurt myself. So in that situation, during those days, I was playing small equipment. Now, because I play so much, I mean, if I have a 4-hour engagement, I'll play for an hour in the morning, and then when I come home, I'll play for another hour. I mean, I do 4 or 5, 6 hours a day, whether I work or not. I got more girth here now. I don't play equipment that small, and I'm getting a much fuller sound, and I have more range than I had when I was on Harry's band. I mean, the smallest mouthpiece I play, it's my lead mouthpiece that Peter Pickett has designed for me. It's got basically a Bach 7 rim. So that's equivalent to like a Reeves 41 rim.
Yeah.
And the depth is a little deeper than a Reeves medium bowl. So it's this mouthpiece that Peter Pickett made me. And I liked the blank is almost like a Giardinelli blank, not quite, but it's a little different from a Giardinelli blank. This is like a Reeves 41M with a 28 drill. That's the absolute smallest mouthpiece I play. I find myself doing most of the recording here at home, and when I go do a session, most of it is stuff that's in the mid-register. I have a Bach 7D mouthpiece, which is what Frost played. I have a 7D mouthpiece, and I can play up to a high G on it, and I have a lot of flexibility, and it gets a nice sound, especially if I'm in a trumpet section where everybody else is playing a Bach mouthpiece. I mean, if I'm working with Art Davis and Doug Scharf and Dave Katz, I'll use a Bach mouthpiece, because the sound of a trumpet section where everybody's using a Bach mouthpiece, it's like now we're talking like the old days in New York with Bernie Glow and Marky Markowitz and Chris Griffin and Jimmy Nottingham, where all them cats were playing Bachs, and that's why those sections sound so good, So, I mean, when I have an opportunity to, if something's only written to a high F or something, I'll do it on a Bach mouthpiece now. If I'm playing on the New Standard Jazz Orchestra or Pete Elman's big band or Joshua Jern's band, where all those books are written up to like a double high C, I'll use this mouthpiece that Peter Pickett made for me, which is like a 7 rim. It's like a little deeper than a Reeves M cup and standard back bore. And because I play so much, I've got more range now, I don't even use it, because most books written up to an A, maybe very rarely there's a double C. I have no problem going up there. But the important thing is that my pitch and my control in the mid and lower registers is really solid, and the trombone players and the saxophone players can depend on my pitch being there because they like that. I'm trying to please trombone players and saxophone players and band leaders. It's like, I tell my students, the only people who care about high notes are other trumpet players. I mean, and that's a very small slice of the general public,
Yeah, that's true. Well, while we're talking about gear, let's just go ahead. We're going to do this segment that I do, which is called Gear Up. So you already kind of thrown out that you're using that Pickett mouthpiece as well as the Bach 7D, and you have your EXO.
Yeah, the EXO Brass 1600i B flat trumpet, and it's a 453 bore horn. Now, there's a lot of other horn manufacturers that present trumpets that are considered in the medium bore category. A medium bore is the bore size of a horn is determined by what the horn is at the valve block, right? And for instance, the Bobby Shoe Yamaha, that's 445 at the valves. That's on the small end of medium. My horn is 453 at the valves. That's like basically a New York Bach medium bore horn is 453. Bobby's horn is 445, but they have a large bore tuning slide on it. They have that dual bore kind of thing happen, which to compensate for the tightness at the valves, they have a large bore tuning slide, and they have a big flare on the bell, and those are great horns, and Bobby certainly sounds wonderful on that horn, and they put a lot of time and energy into designing that horn. I like this horn. This is 453 all the way through. It's a uniform bore configuration, which means after the taper of the lead pipe and before the taper starting at the bell tail, the entire horn is 453. And it just slots like a son of a gun for me, It gets a nice full sound, and, the manufacturing process by their facilities in Taiwan, they're so consistent. They do a beautiful job manufacturing the parts and assembling these horns. So that's why I play for a trumpet. My C trumpet is an EXO Brass C trumpet. My piccolo trumpet is an EXO Brass piccolo trumpet, and they all just play wonderfully, So I've been with I designed this horn 12 years ago. 12 years ago, I've been playing this horn,
Yeah.
And I love it. And this is still the first one that, after I approved the design for this thing, they just sent me one right off the production line. And it's the same horn. I've been playing it the whole time. And when I put that Bach mouthpiece in it, because I also play on 2 symphony orchestras here. I play on the City Symphony of Chicago, which is the AF of M, the Union City Symphony. I play on the Chicago Educators Orchestra too, full symphony orchestra. And when I use this horn with those bands, I call them a band. I use Bach mouthpieces. I have the 7D, and sometimes I'll use a 10C. And I'm assistant principal on those orchestras, and this horn it adapts to that sound, and I get that sound, and so it's a very versatile trumpet. And I have the other horns, and I basically I have my legit mouthpiece and my commercial mouthpiece. My legit mouthpiece, for all intents and purposes, is at 7D, and my commercial mouthpiece is this one that Peter Pickett made for me, and it's also got a 7 rim. I've gone a little wider. When I was on Harry's band, I was using a mouthpiece that was a 10 rim, and the one that I would use, the V cup, for when he would write stuff like when there was 11 double C's in it and stuff. It was a V cup mouthpiece that was designed off of the Giardinelli MF1 with a straight V. Not those mouthpieces were made before Maynard went to the convex V. The Giardinelli MF1 was a straight V, and the inner diameter is about a 12. And I can play those. I mean, I used to be able to play those mouthpieces. If I really forced myself, I could probably still play it, but I'm getting so much more sound out of it. I'm playing a wider rim and a deeper cup, and it's because, like I said before, I play trumpet all day. I mean, I just have the horns out. It's part of my life. 30-minute increments. I mean, I'll do a half an hour and have breakfast. I'll do it in a half an hour. I'll have lunch. I'll do a half an hour. Vicky and I will go shopping. I'll do it in a half an hour. I'll teach a student. I'll do a half an hour. I'll teach another student. I'll do a half an hour. I'll teach another student, and then I'll have dinner, and then I'll come back and do a half an hour. Man, by the time midnight rolls around, I've played about 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
So I mean, as far as gear is concerned, I have the luxury because I have this house and the basement is soundproof. I can practice at 4:30 in the morning if I want. Never gotten any complaints from neighbors. Because I had the luxury to play more, I've pushed the limits on how big I can go for a commercial mouthpiece.
That's interesting. So when you think about the equipment, and particularly as you've gone through your own process here, both of designing your mouthpieces and designing your being part of the design of the horns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You obviously then have ideas of what needs to change in order to create the sound that you're looking to create. So for your students, because you are certainly an educator, what tips do you give your students for when they're looking to change their gear?
I encourage them to be normal. Like just
normal is overrated, Roger. I don't know what you're talking about.
Why don't you just be a normal trumpet player? I mean, why don't you just learn how to own everything between low F sharp and high C, and be able to double and triple tongue all the way up there and play in all keys, in all dynamic levels. I mean, for instance, when I first met Derek Watkins, the great Derek Watkins, in 1979, I went to England with Tom Jones, and Derek used to do Tom Jones's gig. In fact, he did all Tom's first recordings. So he came around, and we met, and we went to a pub and had pints of beer together, and we just talked about trumpet playing, and he was a beautiful guy and one of the greatest trumpet players ever. And he said, and he used to call me Roger. He said, Roger, he says, all the notes below low C, that's the low register. And all the notes above high C, that's the high register. And all the notes between low C and high C, that's the cash register. I mean, what he was telling me, here's a guy who could play anything, but he said 90% of the money I make is between low C and high C. So I tell my students, and then I say, no matter what kind of a player you want to be, whether you want to play funk or jazz or be in a rock and roll horn section or a big band lead trumpet player or a jazz soloist, you have to address the classical idiom. you have to approach trumpet playing as when you're getting your technique together, as if you're going to train yourself as if you're going to be an orchestral player. And then you can play whatever you want, but you got your technique. One of the reasons why Wynton Marsalis, and I'm still answering your question, but one of the reasons why Wynton Marsalis has accomplished the impossible, he's a jazz trumpet player who's become a household name. And it's because the general public may not understand quite how sophisticated he is when he improvises. But what attracts the general public is his sound and the purity of the sound and his flawless execution of the ideas that he presents when he plays a solo. And it's because of his classical training. And he really worked hard and became a great all-around trumpet player. And there are many, many great jazz improvisers who are not household names. And maybe one of the reasons is because they don't have that clean, flawless sound and technique that the general public they gravitate to that, you know? So what I tell my students is try to become a normal trumpet player. Why don't you just learn how to be good? You know, don't be obsessed with being great or the best or seeing how high you can play. Why don't you just be good and do a good job and play in tune and observe the dynamics? In other words, do everything that you're supposed to do. Like, and actually read the text from the Arban book, and you'll see some great grammar too. I mean, that stuff was written beautifully. I mean, the Arban book was published in 1859, which was a year before the American Civil War started. And it was published by a guy who was the trumpet instructor at the Paris Conservatory. And in 1859, there was no middle class. You had the rich people and you had the real poor people. He was obviously a very educated, really rich Frenchman. And he was very pompous, too. You read the text from the Arban's book, the translation into English, and it's like, man, he would have been hard to study with, man, because he was not going to he wasn't going to take any crap, man.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, and so, you know, I tell my students, you know, initially, why don't you learn how to play with a brass band? Why don't you get some experience playing with an orchestra, even third or fourth chair? You know, learn how to go on a band that swings, take some gigs with rock and roll bands, but just why don't you learn how to be a normal player and be satisfied with going in and just doing a good job and getting some gigs just playing. When I started in LA, I just got hired when I was a kid. I was like third trumpet on all the bands. And I got to sit next to like John Harner, who playing lead, and Gene Go was on some of the bands playing lead. And then there would be these great jazz players playing all. And so being third just gets you in there. The third book is a nice book. Yeah. You know, and so I tell them, you know, I'll say it again. I say, why don't you just be normal? You know, just learn how to play. Don't try to stick out. That what you don't want to do is bring attention to yourself on Broadway shows, and like I do some of the shows at Ravinia, and I've done some of the ones here in Broadway. You just want to play the book, and don't. There's an art to not bringing attention to yourself, but still nailing everything. You know, and I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about because of all the work you've done.
Yeah, it's finding that perfect balance, you know.
Yeah, it's of normalcy.
Yeah, well, I do think that the point of normalcy for trumpet players is maybe a little more on the abnormal side of the spectrum, just because of the nature of what we do. You know, all that. I think all that back pressure just does something wacky to our brains.
Well, I mean, you know, like let's look at some great trumpet players. Let's look at Chuck Findlay, he has ridiculous facility on the trumpet. He's got perfect pitch, and he can do anything on the horn. I'm sure when he started out, he just wanted to be like fit in and be normal. You know, you look at Al Hurt, who became a big trumpet star, and he can double tongue and triple tongue and all. When I think he started out on some big bands, just going out and fitting in with the section and being normal. It's like Chris Bodie. You look at Chris Bodie, it's like, and the general public, they buy tickets, they fill up theaters, they hear this guy. He started out just in the studios in New York, a wonderful musician, great, beautiful sound. And he was doing some top sessions with like Paul Simon and stuff like that. And then he became Chris Bodie and he's out there. You never hear him playing above a high E or high F, but he's playing beautiful stuff that the general public just love because of his sound and his flawless execution. So, it's like having great technique and good pitch and a nice sound will do a lot more for you than being able to be, slamming out double high C's and that's all you can do. It's like, I know a lot of people with great high chops, believe me, but and with many of them, the last place they need to be sitting is in the first trumpet book, first trumpet chair. You know what I'm saying? So in some of these students, some of them have the potential to have great high chops, and I'm not opposed to helping them develop that, but I want them to be a good trumpet player first. And I've helped a lot of people develop their range, and I have them develop it the right way so that once you get those extra notes, you're never going to lose them. So it's not a shot in the dark, hit and miss process for you to be able to go in the upper register,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we're going to wind down here, and we got one last segment that we're going to do. And it's brought to us by our good friends from Robinson's Remedies, Kenny Robinson and Richard. This is the Robinson's Remedies rapid fire round. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions that are going to be all over the board, Roger. Some of them will be about music. Some of them won't.
So is this timed?
Well, we could time it.
Is this like taking the Mensa test?
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. All right. This is the Mensa test for trumpet players.
All right.
All right. So here we go, Roger. Question number 1. Who's the biggest influence on your life that is not a trumpet player?
Currently, or I'd have to say my dad.
Yeah. Okay. What's your favorite book?
I like all the Gary Larson books.
All right. What's the worst movie you've ever seen?
Probably something on Svengoolie, that TV show, where they it's like maybe like The Blob or something like that,
Yeah, one of those.
One of those. And I love the worst movie I've ever seen. I love watching those movies. It's like, man, it's like sometimes I like hearing the worst record in the world because it's just fun to listen to.
There you go. All right. If you weren't a trumpet player, what would you want to be?
Meteorologist.
Okay. That way you can be wrong 50% of the time and still stay and work. Exactly. All right. What is your favorite drink?
I'd have to say I drink oat milk, and I like almond milk. And, I don't drink alcohol anymore. I stopped doing that a long time ago. So as far as now, my favorite drink, sometimes when I really want to get wild, I'll go have some really good cream soda. Yeah. But, it's like my staple during the day is coffee. I go to Starbucks and I have coffee.
There you go. You cream or no cream?
Creamer. An almond milk creamer, because my wife and I are vegan too. Yeah. So it's like no dairy products, no meat, and everything.
Okay. Cool. All right. You could have a vegan dinner party and invite any 3 living people to join you at your party. Any 3 living people. Who would they be?
Well, a dinner party, I couldn't have just trumpet players because I would want it to be enjoyable for everybody. I'd have like one trumpet player there. I'd probably like invite Wynton Marsalis because he's extremely interesting and a very smart cat. I would invite my next door neighbor, and I would probably, well, Arnold Schweitzer, he's not alive anymore, but you know, the third person, I don't know. I can't answer that completely. I gave you 2/3 of an
Okay,
answer.
you gave me 2/3. Okay. All right. Well, you've got 3 more chairs there, and they're for any 3 people from history. So you can invite any 3 people from history to this party.
Well, I'd have Louis Armstrong, Sidney Bechet, and Chick Webb.
Okay. All right. Lacquer, plated, or raw?
Lacquer.
All right. What's your favorite quote?
Well, I mean, I have to like give you
okay, we'll back up on that.
An addendum to that.
Okay, addendum.
On my commercial acts and my flugelhorn and my commercial trumpet, I like lacquer. For my symphonic gear, I like silver plated. It just blends better because everybody's showing up with silver plated horns. It just blends better. So like my piccolo trumpet, my C trumpet, and my E flat cornet, they're all silver plated. But for commercial dates, I like lacquer.
Like lacquer. All right. What's your favorite quote, Roger?
Oh man, there's so many good ones. The one that just comes to mind because of what we've been talking about. And you know, I don't have any favorite quote. My favorite quote is the most appropriate one for the situation.
There you go.
So I'd have to say for what we've been talking about, there's 2 quotes, and they both come from Bobby Shue. You are your own best teacher. And the second quote would be, when your chops feel bad, back off. And when your chops feel great, back off.
I like that one.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, I'm really being terrible about answering these questions.
Oh no,
you know,
you're doing.
It's just too. I can't narrow it down to one anything. You know.
Yeah, that's okay. It's all good, man. What's your greatest fear?
Dying.
Okay. You could be granted one superpower. What would you want it to be?
One superpower. Well, I would want to be able to have the power that would make everybody in the planet love each other. And I don't know what power that could possibly be. It would be the power of mind, or to influence whatever power it would take to make everybody in the planet love each other. How about that?
That would be a great one.
That's actually a terrible answer because it's not like I've described the application of that power. The result of that power would be that.
Well, we'll work together on a comic book on that. Roger Ingram, the
spreader of love.
Let's not talk. That's back in the 70s, man. Yeah. All right. Well, let's go. Next question here. And I know this one is going to be no problem for you to answer. What aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most overrated?
Oh, playing high notes.
And what aspect of trumpet playing do you think is the most underrated?
And the funny thing is, I'm one of the worst offenders. And I'm telling you, coming from me, for me to say that, it's got to mean something to you because, yeah, I can easily do it. But when I was out there with Harry's band, and I love Harry, he's like this incredibly talented musical genius cat. And he wrote all that stuff, and for his band, it was completely appropriate to do that. And I had a carte blanche on doing it. And now I'm just here to tell you, it's overrated. To me, it's like to be able to play in the upper register like that. It's like a parlor trick. It's like after you have all this strength and you own everything from low F sharp to high C, you figure out there's a knack for being able to go in there and do it. And after you've discovered how to do it, you almost say to yourself, is really, that's it? And it's like, yeah, that's it. It's like all of that to do and hoopla is made because of that. And it's like, yeah, and it's kind of like, it's to say it's overrated. I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. There's appropriate, exciting places to be able to do that. But I have to say, generally, it's overrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And what do you think is the most underrated aspect
of trumpet playing?
Of trumpet playing. Mm-hmm.
Is sound. I mean, everybody gets their own sound, but I think I hear a lot of players that I work with, in various situations to where there's the potential there for there to be this beautiful. I don't think people develop their sound as much as they should. I think that there's a lot of people, and I hear them play, I say, man, why don't you just think about your sound just a little bit more than you are and realize that all in all, that's the first thing that touches people is your sound. You're going to have the sound that you're going to have, but I think that some people why don't you just consider it a little bit more than everything else,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. That's a great answer. All right. You can go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
I would have been a little bit more discerning about what my goals were. I early on, I became very tunnel visioned about my goals. I just wanted to be this one thing, and I ended up being it. But I would have been a little bit more discerning about possibly looking at everything in a bit of a broader picture than I did.
Okay, cool.
Does that answer that question?
Yeah, that does.
And I'm kind of like, really? I mean, discernment,
Yeah. That's good. And you're going to give your younger self one piece of advice about life.
Oh, be tolerant. How many more questions have we got? What is this, 50?
Last one.
Oh,
last one.
All right,
last one coming up right here.
Last one. Is the clock running on this?
The clock is ticking down. All right, final question. Roger, what do you want your legacy to be?
I mean, we're talking about something on my gravestone.
Just 100 years ago, people were sitting around talking about Roger Ingram. What's the one thing you want to be remembered for or by?
And does this have to do with every aspect of my life or just trumpet playing?
Roger.
He was honest.
There you go. And that's your honest answer?
That's my honest answer.
Okay. All right. Well, Roger, I can honestly say that this has been an enjoyable conversation. It's always great to talk to you, my friend. You are a wealth of knowledge. You're an inspiration to many of us. But
it's an honor for you to ask me here and invite me and to ask me about stuff. It's like there's so many, and I admire you and everything that you've been doing and what you're trying to do with this whole program that you got. I think it's beautiful, and I'd be happy to. If you ever wanted me back, if I'd be happy to answer questions, and if just so long as like what I'm saying is helpful.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and we will have you back. I've got some special events. I'll be coming up into year number 2 here soon, and so I've got some new things I want to roll out in year number 2 of the Trumpet Gurus Hang, and I think that you're definitely going to fit in some of those plans. So. I appreciate everything. And if you're interested in learning more about Roger and his approach to playing, certainly pick up his book. And also, if you want to take a lesson with Roger, you can find the link to his website in the show notes and schedule a lesson with him. I'm here to tell you that he is a fantastic teacher. He's really helped me with a lot of things. He's just a really insightful teacher. And as you can probably tell, he just loves trumpet. So please check out Roger and help support him with some lessons.
Yeah, the book is called Clinical Notes on Trumpet Playing, and it's just a textbook. There's no exercises. And any of this stuff and the Peter Pickett mouthpieces and the Mute Meister, I designed a line of mutes that Terry Warburton manufactures and distributes. And you can find all links to all that stuff on the homepage of my website, which is rogeringram.com. So, because I'm just trying to make a living here too.
Hey, exactly. you got to pay for that house.
Well, yeah, it's like we all are just trying to get by, man. That's all.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you for spending time with us today on the Trumpet Gurus Hang. And as always, peace and slide grease. We're out. Hey, thank you so much for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating connection through our mutual love for the trumpet life. I hope that you learned a few things about today's guest and had some laughs along the way. Don't forget to give us a review. We love those 5-star ratings. And please share this podcast with your friends. We want to see our hang grow for show. Have a suggestion for a future topic or a guest? Hit me up at thetrumpetgurus@gmail.com. Our opening theme was written and performed by Lexi Signor, and all other music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. So in the words of W.C. Handy, life is like a trumpet. If you don't put anything into it, you don't get anything out. So go out there and let your trumpet sound. And I'll see you at the next hang.